The famous CD is on his soapbox to start your Saturday.
Oh, testify!
It's time for your Saturday sports sermon.
Even before the first college football playoff polls were released, by the time I got to Saturday night, I had a bad feeling, and it was a really strong feeling, I would say, that the lovable losers, or the lovable underdogs, I should say, not losers because they're undefeated, but the lovable underdogs that are the Cincinnati Bearcats were going to be on the outside looking in. That said, I was still pretty surprised to see how far they wound up falling after being ranked second in the AP poll just a few days prior. Of course, you look at it. Georgia makes sense. Number one team in the country, undefeated, and they've looked dominant doing so. They deserve to be that number one seed. It's a little weird thing about two teams from the state of Georgia actually doing well, but maybe they're kind of breezing through the SEC East a lot like the Atlanta Braves breeze through the highways and byways of the Atlanta area or Cobb County, Georgia. Hopefully they were respecting the law and order and going the speed limit, because I know they had policemen out there and everything, but I'm sure the big boss man might have been a little bit disappointed if they didn't go down Cobb County, Georgia, respectfully. But the one that's got everybody talking about is Alabama. And of course, it's Alabama that's the one that everybody talks about, because of the fact that they are ranked second in the first college football playoff poll of the 2021 season, pretty much proving that the committee knows they'll represent the SEC West in Atlanta, and even if they lose, they'll probably wind up getting into the playoffs. It pretty much proves that there is an SEC bias, and there's definitely an Alabama bias. They're 7-1, and a lot of their wins were bolstered up because of the fact that they somehow, some way threw in Kentucky, Texas A&M, Mississippi State into that top 25 mix to boost them up. Even their loss to Texas A&M didn't hurt them, because again, it's all about the Alabama bias. The other thing I was surprised about was the top four, and the rounding out of it was number 4, Oregon, because I had them kind of not necessarily counted out, but they lost to a team in Stanford. They lost to Stanford a while back. And it makes me wonder, yes, Oregon beat Ohio State, but does a win in week 2 really hold all that weight? Does a win in September hold all that weight in November? That's my biggest question in all this, because I had about 50 million questions as the rankings were revealed. But it made me think about that. It was crazy how there was an actual debate about whether or not a team should be higher based on who they played and who they beat, because Ohio State was at 5th, right behind Oregon. And again, I was definitely surprised at that. Now, does Oregon make the playoff? I don't necessarily think so, because they have a chance of playing themselves out of it. They've still got their rest of their Pac-12 schedule ahead of them, and like one loss will undo all of that, and the Pac-12 will not have a contender. I think the Big 12 will not have a contender as well, because of the fact they have not been up to snuff. Oklahoma is undefeated, yes, but Oklahoma is the most suspect undefeated team I've ever seen. They barely beat Tulane, and they've had games where they should have lost. I could probably rattle off the last 3 or 4 contests they've had where they've just looked absolutely suspect. They're ranked 8th. But we'll get to those Bearcats now. We'll get to the crux of the matter here. The 6th ranked Cincinnati Bearcats proves to me, and probably proves to a lot of y'all, there will never be, in this current format of the tournament, a group of 5 team. There is a clear glass ceiling, because the college football gods that are in that committee want to see the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States of the world, even to a certain extent, even Oregon. They want to see those teams representing their conferences. Guess what? That happens. That's what happens there. It's name recognition. Oregon has the Nike brand associated with it. It's almost like a synonym. If you look up in the dictionary, Oregon, you might find Nike in there somewhere. Then you have Alabama, obviously. They're synonymous with national championships. Georgia has been a power in the SEC alongside Alabama in recent years. Kirby Smart's done a great job with that program. Then you have, obviously, Michigan State. Everybody's favorite, I'm going to go ahead and say it. The internet's like golden child right now. Because Mel Tucker is making Michigan State great for the first time in a long time. I'd say probably since the first college football playoff year. That program was not in dire straits, and in 2 years he's turned that thing around, and it's great to see. Now the big $1 million question is, how much does that affect the hiring of him to LSU, or is Woodward really going after the big fish in Jimbo Fisher? That's a different conversation we can have. If you want to talk about that, 337-706-0111. But the committee showed me that group of fives aren't allowed. Even if you're undefeated, you have to do everything in your power. You've got to jump over hurdles. They're hurdles, nonetheless. Like, everybody's going to jump over hurdles, but the hurdles that group of five teams have to jump over are astronomical. Yes, they beat a Notre Dame team, a top 10 team in the college football playoff poll, but that wasn't enough. Because it's Notre Dame. Notre Dame always gets in the top 10 somehow, even when they're overhyped and maybe a little bit overrated. Be interesting to see how they do later on today when they play Navy. So I gotta say, this is something where I'm like, it's going to continue to happen because they're always going to get the name brand getting there. The top 10 is going to be based off of name brand recognition in some cases. Because not every team, everybody in that committee is watching every single game. I can guarantee you that. I think we can all agree on that front. But this is where the real issue is. I think people just need to kind of look themselves in the mirror and realize this fact. What that team did just a few weeks ago. This is why they aren't in that number. This is why they aren't in that grouping of teams in the college football playoff. They're not in the top 4. It's because they haven't been able to do something I talked about with the Cajuns a while back, and that's get style points. They are a group of 5 team, and they're going to jump ship to the Big 12. So basically they're like let's say you got your kids at the restaurant. They're about 10, 11 years old. They're about to get ready to order from the kids menu. That's how close they are to becoming a big boy and going over to the Power 5 conferences and going over to the Big 12. But until then, they won't have a shot at the table or a seat at the table if they can't do what they didn't do last week. If they beat Tulane like a drum and they beat some of these other opponents down into the pavement and get style points, which shouldn't matter in metrics, but it does in terms of what people look at. Is I'm guarantee you, probably not many people were watching Cincy Tulane, but you look at the score, it tells you a lot. The fact that you were trailing at one point, that's another knock. If I'm a member of the committee that has a clear and obvious bias. And I talked about it a few weeks ago with the Cajuns, where they weren't getting things done in a certain way. And you know what that was? Not winning big. And I go back to the evil coach of the first Mighty Ducks movie, and he said it best.
It's not worth winning if you can't win big!
No, exactly. You can't win. It's not worth winning if you can't win big. That's what's going to matter. Again, style points won't matter when it comes to ranking the best teams. I mean, the absolute best teams in the country. It's not going to matter. Think about it. You only had really one group of 5 team worth anything make the college football playoff poll. SMU, the Cajuns even. The Cajuns were ranked 24th in the AP poll. They didn't get in. There was a lot of teams that did not get into the AP top 25 rankings that were left out in the cold and will likely never get past the velvet rope like they're the Batabi brothers going into the Roxbury. Like, there's no way you're going to get into that grouping. There's no way you are going to get into that spot if you are doing things like this. That's where the whole conversation is, and it shifts over what happens with this program. And that's the state of the union when it comes to the college football playoff. And even when they expand, like, does the group of 5 actually get a legitimate seat at the table? I have a theory, and I'm going to throw it out here right now. I would not be surprised if the Power 5 conferences would split away by the time we get to that magic year when we officially shift over to a 12-team playoff, and it becomes a 12-team playoff Power 5 only. Then I'm sure there's going to be a lot of paperwork, a lot of red tape, and maybe some lawsuits are going to cause this thing to get locked up in God knows how long, but it makes you wonder if things stay the same as they are right now. And we see the expansion of conferences and the playoff happen, and it expands. Does the group of 5 get a justifiable seat at the table, and it's a true, fair, and just process to allow more parity in these tournaments, in these playoffs, or will it continue to be the bourgeoisie of the Power 5 conferences while the group of 5s just continue to get New Orleans bowls? Because let's be honest, there ain't going to be many New Year's 6 bowls if there's a 12-team